Hello, I'm Erica Harmon, Manager of Archives and Records at Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site. Welcome to Artifacts After Dark, a special presentation of artifacts from our collection streaming live from Cell Block 7 during night tours. The Artifacts After Dark program is a mashup celebrating Archives Month, which is all of October, as well as Eastern State's night tours, which will be available from 6 p.m. on select nights through November 15th. For more information, check out our website or the video that will be posted directly after this live stream. Before we begin, I want to assure our viewers that although I am not wearing a mask for the purpose of this live stream, Eastern State is strictly following city and state protocols for COVID-19, and that I'll be popping my mask right back on as soon as we wrap up so that our members in the audience can come and take a closer look at any objects and ask me any additional questions they may have. This week's Artifacts After Dark theme explores power and control at Eastern State Penitentiary and in prisons today. When we started thinking about this topic, we felt it was important to extend our definition of power and control beyond the idea of physical domination. We also want viewers to consider these words from various angles, including ways that incarcerated people can become empowered or find collective power while in prison. These ideas relate back to the core founding principles of Eastern State. So while we will discuss power and control in the context of violence and intimidation, we will look at these concepts from a more hopeful perspective as well. That said, you may find some of the topics I discussed tonight upsetting. If you've visited the building before or have been tuning in over the past few weeks, you already know that during Eastern State's early years, people incarcerated here were expected to remain in silent isolation for the duration of their sentence, only occasionally speaking to official visitors. One of the initial goals of this system was to assert power over the prisoner's health through environmental control. Administrators hoped to eliminate the disease of most concern at the time, typhus, which was also called jail fever. By providing well-ventilated spaces with exercise yards and eliminating the overcrowded conditions common in prisons and jails, they experienced a lot of success. To date, we've only found 4 people who died of typhus while incarcerated here. Meanwhile, more than 600 people died here of tuberculosis. Unlike typhus, which is generally spread through lice or fleas, tuberculosis is spread through the air when an infected person coughs, speaks, or sings. In their journals, wardens and physicians often denied accountability for the deaths by attributing the appearance of the disease to pre-existing conditions, some moral failure on the part of the prisoner, and even racism. One example, a report titled "On the Effects of Secluded and Gloomy Imprisonment on the Individuals of the African Variety of Mankind in the Production of Disease" by Benjamin H. Coates, MD, explores reasons why administrators believed African Americans died at much higher rates than white prisoners. Particularly from tuberculosis. Racist ideas caused the author to draw the conclusion that African American prisoners suffered higher mortality due to being biologically different from white prisoners. Today, contagious diseases such as COVID-19 and tuberculosis still disproportionately affect African Americans. Prisons experienced a surge in the use of solitary confinement this year in an attempt to control the spread of COVID-19. At least 300,000 people have been placed in solitary confinement in an effort to combat the virus. That's an increase of 500%. Meanwhile, there is no evidence at this time that the strategy has been successful. While in theory this may seem like a sensible way to regain control of the pandemic in prisons, experts warn that solitary confinement in prisons is not similar to either medical quarantine or self-imposed isolation, and recommend reducing prison populations instead. In addition to their attempts to provide for the health of the prisoners, Eastern State administrators believed that silent isolation was a humane way to encourage incarcerated people to look inward to find penitence or true regret. However, punishments for breaking the rules while incarcerated were harsh. Over here we have some examples of rules for prisoners from the early 1800s. Punishments for breaking these rules could include being placed in a dark cell or deprivation of regular meals, which were replaced by a diet of bread and water for a period of time. Below the rules for prisoners are some rather disturbing images of the more brutal consequences for disobedience, including restraints such as the tranquilizing chair, straitjacket, and iron gag. Administrators were not the only people to make use of violence or the threat of violence to attempt to control situations and people at Eastern State. Our collection has more than 100 shanks or shivs, makeshift weapons that were confiscated from prisoners. The shivs in our collection are mostly made from butter knives, although there are also some made from bone, spoons, files, scissors, and bucket handles. To my knowledge, none of the shivs in our collection were ever used. They were discovered by staff before they could inflict harm. While there were several uprisings at Eastern State during the 20th century, there were also peaceful attempts to influence the administration. In October of 1945, 12 prisoners participated in a hunger strike for 2 weeks. 11 of the participants, including famous bank robber Slick Willie Sutton, had tunneled out of the prison the previous April. They demanded that their movie privileges be reinstated and that they be allowed to exercise in the yard with all the other prisoners. Here we have some petitions from those prisoners earlier in that year. In 2018, a nationwide prison strike lasted for more than 2 weeks and had more broadly altruistic goals. During that period, work stoppages, prison yard protests, commissary boycotts, hunger strikes, and other methods of resistance were employed in prisons throughout the United States and even abroad. The strike included a list of 10 demands that, among other things, called for voting rights for all currently and formerly incarcerated people, immediate improvements to conditions of all prisons, a minimum wage for incarcerated workers that is the same as their state's minimum wage, an end to disproportionate sentencing for Black prisoners, reinstating Pell College grants for prisoners in all states, and an end to denying prison programs to people based on the crime of which they were convicted. Sometimes staff and incarcerated people were able to work together to provide support and skills that would empower incarcerated people during their sentences and on their return to their communities. In the 1950s and 60s, Eastern State saw an influx of social workers and psychologists and launched what was, at the time, considered a progressive treatment program that included group therapy. This drawing by a prisoner praises the program by saying in the caption, "Give me Eastern Penn for the best group therapy." Last week, we touched on the power of art and music to provide emotional, economic, and career opportunities to incarcerated people, but I think it's worth discussing again tonight. One of the most exceptional stories to come from Eastern State is that of Lester Smith. After converting to Catholicism while incarcerated, Smith, who signed his works Paul Martin in honor of his favorite saint, also took up drawing and painting, eventually being asked to paint the murals in the Catholic chaplain's office. Here we have a photograph of an untitled painting, which the staff here has come to call The Penitent Prisoner. When I look at this, I see a self-portrait showing through art how Smith experienced freedom from his past. What's your interpretation of this image? Today, Mural Arts Philadelphia is the nation's largest public art program, dedicated to the belief that art ignites change. They feel that art is the thread that connects all restorative justice programs and projects, uniting neighbors who have been affected by violence or crime through shared creative expression. The program facilitates the forging of growth and strong, positive bonds between incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals, young adults on probation, and their respective communities. At Mural Arts, people who are currently incarcerated on parole and/or on probation are given the opportunity to receive art instruction, contribute to new murals, and participate in other constructive community service work. Through this training and experience, participants are able to repair harm to communities impacted by crime. Former Eastern State educator and mural arts artist Russell Craig recently completed a mural at the Municipal Services Building at 1401 JFK Boulevard in Philadelphia, titled Crown, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. In addition to art and music courses at Eastern State, there were general education and vocational courses as well. On the center of the table, we have an article commemorating graduation exercises for prisoners who earned their high school and other vocational degrees, and an image of an incarcerated person engaged in study. The Bard Prison Initiative, BPI, extends the full liberal arts curriculum of Bard College into 6 New York State prisons. Through BPI, students and faculty engage in ambitious college coursework, challenging one another intellectually and build a supportive community. Incarcerated students undergo a selective admission process, enroll full-time in the same courses as Bard's main campus, are held to the same standards as all Bard College students, and graduate with Bard College degrees. BPI students discover new strengths and direction that often fundamentally alter their relationship to themselves, their communities, and the world in which we live. In addition to the work done inside prison, BPI also works with alumni after their incarceration through paid fellowships and internships. 85% of alumni are employed within 2 months of returning home. Before we take questions from our live member audience and folks watching online, I'd like to pose a few questions that I thought about while preparing for tonight. How much control do prisons have the right to exercise over incarcerated people? If prisons remove individuals' power to act of their own accord, what responsibilities should prisons accept on behalf of the incarcerated people? How can we create more opportunities for incarcerated people to advocate for change both inside prison and in outside communities? This being an election year, the last question is particularly relevant in terms of voting, which we won't explore here, but I encourage you to learn more at the link we'll include in the comments. Finally, I'm curious to know, did the discussion tonight change your perspectives on power, control, and prison? And if so, how? We now have some time for any questions you may have. Members in the audience, is there anything you would like to ask?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
That's a official officer's jacket of the staff. Do you still have any original uniforms that the prisoners wore?
The question is, do we have any original prisoner uniforms? And the answer is no, we don't. We have some bits of fabric that were found on the site when we reopened after being abandoned in the 1970s, but we don't have a complete prisoner's uniform from any period. And this is the only guard jacket that we have. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, well, thank you again for attending Artifacts After Dark at Night tours online, and thank you to our members for attending in person. I'll be back with a different set of artifacts from Eastern States past next week at 7 p.m. for our final Artifacts After Dark presentation. I look forward to seeing you then. A video with more information about visiting Eastern State at night will be posted directly after this. Have a great evening.